Alan, I need you to go back to Earth and bring Invincible here. He is the key to turning the tide of this war.
We are here talking Season 2, Part 2, Episode 5 of... As we immediately pick up after Mark was given the orders by General Kreed to prepare Earth for the takeover of the Viltrumites, we see Mark looks over the devastation left on Thraxa. Now, just before Mark passes out, the look on his face made me think that he has some sense of deja vu for what happened to him after surviving the fight with his father and seeing the destruction left in Chicago back in the Season 1 finale. Now, Mark is helped by Thraxans and finds his newly found stepmother and his little brother are okay. As Andressa gives him a pick-me-up and lets him know that even though he blames himself and his father's presence on this planet, she reminds him that if he wasn't there, they wouldn't have survived. As we see time has passed and we see Mark is healed and he's helping to rebuild. As we see Nuazad has aged and lets Mark know that they have prepared a ship for him to return home. But Mark wants to continue to stick around and help as he believes his absence from Earth is fine because they've got heroes to protect them. As we quickly cut to Earth, we meet...
Behold! The might of Omnipotus!
Who appeared in Invincible issues 27 and 87, and in the comics, he's over 12 feet tall and weighs over 2,800 pounds and has super strength and known as a destroyer of worlds and has the ability to control matter and manipulate reality. Now, initially when I saw this scene, I thought to myself, this must be taking place in another universe or sometime in the future because it's not just the Guardians of the Globe that are facing against him, but we notice that there are other heroes that we haven't even met yet, and some of them belong to the Capes Inc. But then if you look behind Immortal, you'll see that Shrinking Ray and Kate, who we know what happens to them later in this episode, so this must be a flashback to when Invincible wasn't on Earth. Or are we witnessing the power of
Might of Omnipotus!
Reality manipulation in play? Now, Andressa wants Mark to return to Earth against his wishes to stay and help, as she also wants him to take his little brother with him because her days are numbered and she doesn't want him to grow up with everyone around him dead or close to dying. Now, we know that Mark's little brother will grow much quicker than humans, so I wonder if we'll see him age up and become a teenager or an adult by the end of this season. Now, back on Earth, we catch up with Debbie and we see she's back at work and she seems to be getting better. Now, as she's opening up a bottle of wine, Mark arrives and we learn that it's been 2 months since he's been gone. Now, obviously, Debbie is happy to see that her son is safe and back on Earth, but she also meets his brother and she finds out that Nolan's alive. Now, Mark explains everything, and Debbie hasn't forgotten what Nolan has done, but the question is, what are they going to do with Mark's little brother? As we see, Mark suggests that maybe he take a year off of school to look after his little brother, and they really can't seem to figure out what's best for this little guy, but we see Debbie agrees to take time off to help figure things out. Now, this is a perfect example how Nolan's past decisions still affect Debbie and Mark. Just when they both were trying to find some sense of normalcy, Mark going to school, Debbie going back to work, they still have to clean up Nolan's mess. Now, taking a look at this scene, I will admit that I don't think Debbie's fully committed in accepting this current situation of taking over Nolan's newborn child, but remembering her journey in Part 1 and also remembering that she almost took her own life, I was expecting a little bit more of a pushback from her welcoming Nolan's new son, but also learning that he created a new family. So narratively speaking, I really hope that Part 2 doesn't just leave her with babysitting duties, but I'm also very curious to know that if Mark mentioned the deadline that he has to prepare Earth for the oncoming invasion takeover by the Viltrumites. As we check in with Cecil, Donald is determined to get more details on his discoveries of Part 1, and he requests that everyone leaves the room. Now, Cecil initially begins to set up more lies, but eventually takes Donald into the White Room and shows him a section of the room that he's never seen before, and he shows him what they did to him. As we see the state-of-the-art cyborg laid on the table, we learn that Nolan's body actually shielded Donald from most of that explosion and that his brain was still attached, but the rest of his body wasn't able to be salvaged. Now, Cecil tells Donald that he's a better version of himself now, and more importantly, he's alive. But Donald isn't happy to learn the truth, but there's no time to argue as there's bigger fish to fry as they learn the return of Invincible. Now, this reveal obviously sticks with Donald throughout this episode, and I wonder what this will do to his mental state moving forward. Will we see him use his newfound abilities to fight alongside with the heroes, or will he push back and hate what was done to him and become something else? As Mark pays a visit to his best friend William in their dorm room and gives him a quick wiki on what he's been up to the last 2 months, but unfortunately this conversation is cut short because he has to catch up with his girlfriend Amber. As Mark heads her way, he gets interrupted by Cecil. Now, Cecil reminds him of their past agreement as Mark tells him that he knew that Earth was going to be just fine while he was gone. And yet again, we quickly cut back to the Guardians going against this Destroyer of Worlds, and we see that they're getting their asses handed to them. Now, Cecil tells Mark that the Guardians almost died while Mark was gone, and I'm assuming he's referring to that fight again against this World Destroyer and ultimately defeating him. I'm very curious if we'll see more of that story later down the road. Now, Mark finds out that Cecil overheard the news about what he's been up to the last few months because he's been keeping tabs on Debbie at her house. Cecil tells Mark that the crew is on their way to pick up his little brother, but Mark convinces him to call them off, at least for now, as we see Mark finally making his way to Amber and telling her everything that happened to him. Now, while he was off in space, we learned that things weren't going great for Amber. She failed one of her tests, she actually lost her grandfather, all while lying about what Mark was up to. Now, we know that their relationship has been a lot better compared to season 1, and it seems like Amber is accepting him as a hero, but I have a feeling that things will eventually change. I say that because Amber doesn't really get to share her experiences the last few months. Again, failing tests, losing her grandfather, having her boyfriend going off to space for months at a time. I really am curious on what arc we're going to see with Amber going through to the remainder of these episodes, and I'm very curious to know if Mark and Amber will remain to be a couple at the end of this season. Now, we catch up with the Guardians who are training, but Immortal isn't impressed, which is very ironic considering what's going to happen to some of these members later in this episode. See Rudy speaking on the behalf of Monster Girl about her training affecting her transformation and her getting younger, but Monster Girl confronts him about this, and there seems to be some type of tension between them as she brings up that their last date might be the last time they go on one if he continues to speak up for her. Now, I'll speak to this a little bit later in the breakdown, but the 2 months that have passed, it seems that we've gotten some off-screen development that I would have liked to have seen. We see Cecil pops up and fills them in on an incoming ship coming from Mars. Now, Shapesmith's identity is revealed in this scene, and he's surprised to find out that Cecil and half of the Guardians already knew a little bit about him, but he goes into more detail about how he came to Earth, but more importantly, we get a little bit more of his backstory, as he tells them that the human astronaut Russ, who we've known is now the host hive mind, is headed to Earth. As the team sets up their lineup for Earth's defense, we see that Rex gets an idea that involves Eve. As we see Eve, who's living with her parents again, and you can just tell that she's not the happiest as she once was when she was a hero saving people's lives, as she finds Rex in her room. We see that she's still been dealing with what happened to the building in Chicago and her time of being a solo hero and trying to make a change, and how every time she feels she tries to help, she ends up causing more problems. But for the first time, we see Rex giving her a little bit of a wake-up call that everyone messes up and that she's always found a way to get through it. No matter what she's went through, she's always found a way to save countless lives. As Rex eventually asks her for a favor, which is helping the incoming invasion. Now we see Debbie is playing stepmother to Mark's little brother as she tries to feed him food. We see Mark learns that Debbie did get rid of his father's books, the same books that Nolan wanted him to read, as Cecil arrives to tell Mark what's coming. Now, while Mark is getting suited up, we see Cecil makes a pitch for him to take care of Nolan's son, which we see her and Mark say that they can handle the situation alone, but as they leave, we see this look on Debbie's face. To me, this was a look of her maybe being open to his idea of offering to take care of Nolan's son. Now, I can see this going a couple different ways. One, I can see Debbie maybe taking up the offer on Cecil and giving up Mark's little brother, but then also I can see Debbie, because she's such a nice person, her and Mark take care of him, and we see maybe Nolan escaping the Viltrumites, making his way back to Earth, and we're going to see a reunion between Debbie and Nolan while she's taking care of his son. As it's time for the mission on Mars, we see the team is set with the Guardians consisting of Immortal, Shapeshift, Bulletproof, Black Samson, Monster Girl, Ruby, and additions of Invincible and Eve, leaving Rex in charge as the ranking Guardian, and he couldn't predict what's going to happen next.
Monitor other threats while they're gone.
Oh, sure. Like there's gonna be 2 huge world-shattering emergencies at the same time? Oh no! I'd like to see that, Ray.
Meanwhile, we see the Lizard League in action as they take over a facility that's in possession of what seems to be some nuclear weapons, as this leaves the remaining Guardians to respond. Now in space, we see Shapeshift badly providing intel on what to expect, but it's too late as their ship is under attack, leaving Eve to create a protective shield for them as they enter the ship. Now we see the Earth Guardians battling against the Lizards, Kate, Rex, and Ray, as they're putting up somewhat of a good fight, but unfortunately their training didn't pay off, as we see Kate's duplicates getting killed off one by one, and eventually leaving her by herself to fight, but unfortunately she's brutally killed. We see Ray manages to kill Salamander, but gets eaten by the Komodo dragon, leaving Rex by himself. Now Rex is barely able to fight, but he gets a little lucky and manages to kill both Leguana and the Komodo dragon, but barely survives after losing his hand. as the King Lizard holds a gun to his head, but we don't see what happens next. I doubt that he's going to pull the trigger, but it sounds like he might take Rex hostage or turn him into a member of the League, but more importantly, he still has those weapons to his disposal, so who's going to stop him? Now, we end this episode with the Hive Mind fully aware of the Guardian's presence, and we see him overpowering them. Rudy manages to distract it by affecting his nerve systems, leaving them to killing as many as they can before it gets back. Now, Eve creates another shield while Rudy creates a self-destructive bomb out of his suit, but she's not able to hold on for long, leaving them defenseless, and we end the episode. Now, in the post-credit scenes, we see the return of Alan, who's shocked to learn that he's not dead, and he gets out of his recovering cell. As he's greeted by Thetis, he tells him that he purposely turned off his life support to test the theory if he'll die or if he'll come back stronger than ever, as he calls this a payoff worth his life as he's now able to stand his ground against a Viltrumite. Alan tells him that he doesn't plan on coming across any Viltrumites anytime soon, as it is revealed that Thetis is a Viltrumite, or as he puts it, he's much worse. As he was the only one ever to rebel against the Empire, or at least before the discovery of Invincible, he wants Alan to find him because he's the key to turn the tide of this war. Now, I'll be honest, I thought the return of this episode to kick off part 2 was just okay. Now, positively speaking, I did like the brutality of the action towards the end of this episode, but the build-up just felt empty. I think it boils down to the fact that I wasn't a fan of the uses of the 2-month time jump. Now, I get that it kind of represents the time jump that we experienced between part 1 and part 2, but I was expecting a bigger punch in its return. Now, yes, it is unfortunate that we lost Kate and Ray, and we don't know what's going to happen to Rex, but we haven't spent enough time with them to have their deaths have that much of an emotional impact for me. Now, narratively speaking, yes, it's upsetting for these characters, especially Immortal, who we know had a romantic relationship with Kate, and we're going to see how the Guardians will respond to the news, as it's safe to assume that they're going to manage to defeat the Hive Mind in next week's episode. Now, my favorite moment of the episode was the reveal in the post-credit scene, because I am a big fan of Alan. I'm super excited to see this 2.0 version of him, and maybe even seeing Thetis in action, but overall, this episode wasn't the return that I was hopeful for, but we do have things to look forward to and some questions that remain to be answered. For example, where's Angstrom? Has he found what he's been looking for in the multiverse, which is how to defeat Invincible? I really hope that the show doesn't rush that plot because he's been used very lightly so far in this season. Will now captured Nolan escape the Viltrumites and make his way back to Mark, Debbie, and his son? Which, speaking of Debbie, will she continue to take care of Mark's little brother, or will she give him the Cecil against Mark's wishes, creating some type of tension between the two characters? Which, speaking of Cecil, what will Donald do after finding out that he's a cyborg? Will Mark and Amber relationship continue to work, or will she give up on him? Also, will Mark tell everyone about the incoming invasion by the Viltrumites? And we can't forget what's going to happen next with the Mauler twins. Now, this will end my recap and breakdown of episode 5. If you're interested in seeing my live reactions to watching the last 15 minutes of the episode for the very first time, you can find those reactions in the description of this very video. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I would really appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up, share your thoughts on this episode in the comments below, and also consider sharing this video, and also consider subscribing to the channel. You all are awesome, stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next video.